and gentlemen, welcome back to another edition of the Anything But Everything podcast. Thank you once again for joining us. After a very long time of not having an episode, we are finally back with another episode. I am here today with a very, very special guest. I'll introduce him in a second. Just wanted to put out a full disclaimer, as usual, that this podcast is solely intended to help out anybody who might be going through anxiety, stress, depression, what have you. And let me just put out a full disclaimer that anybody who talks on the show to this point is not a professionally trained psychologist, therapist, or shrink. However, it is very much real people who have gone through real problems and struggles and are willing to open up and share it to all the listeners who are listening right now. So, with that out of the way, I am here with a very special guest of mine. He's a very good friend of mine. I met him a few years ago when I was attending school. We have a great bond. We talk about almost anything under the sun, and he's here today to talk about a personal experience of his. Today's topic is focused and geared more towards following your heart, doing what you feel like is best for yourself, advocating for yourself. If something doesn't work for you, speaking out and saying that, hey, this doesn't work for me, I feel like I have to shift the direction, because oftentimes we are influenced by our family, our friends, our peers, and we get swerved into a direction that we don't necessarily want to go in. And this episode is focused more on doing what works for you, what works best for you, what you feel like is in of best interest to you. So, with all that said, I want to welcome my very special guest, Chris. And Chris, how you doing?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, I want to get started because when you and I met, you very openly told me about, this, what we're here to talk about today. When you were going to school, there came to a certain point where your parents pretty much advocated that maybe it would be right for you to study this particular subject as opposed to doing what you felt like you wanted to do. What was that like? What was that timeline like?
So basically, some context is like I am a Filipino. I was born in Philippines. I grew up there until I was 5, moved here. So, but the thing is, like, the general perception of Filipinos is, medical field. Right. If you're not an engineer, you're a nurse. Yeah. If you're not a nurse, you're an engineer. You know what I mean? So, growing up, I guess you could since my dad, he was an overseas worker. He was also a nurse, but he worked in Saudi Arabia, and me and my mom moved here to Los Angeles, United States, when I was 5. So obviously I grew up around her family more.
Right.
And, both my parents are college educated. Both, I guess, they were amongst all their siblings, because most of their siblings are college educated. But I guess you could say they're the most successful, I guess, in terms of like getting a job. So right. Obviously that's the dream coming out of Philippines, where you're like, because Philippines is just poverty stricken, so that's why you could work overseas. So you got out of there, we came over here, and most of my mom's, basically all of my mom's family was here, so that's who we lived with.
Right.
But basically it wasn't forced upon us, but it wasn't forced upon me, but it was always that thing where they put in your head where we were able to do this because we focused on school, we went to this major, we got this profession, now we are fairly successful, we're able to get a house, provide college for you guys and all this stuff and all that. But obviously we can provide college for you, because obviously we were having that conversation at a very young age. So I wasn't at college yet, but obviously those conversations would always come up where it's not like a brainwash, but it's more like an influence to where you want to get here. We want you to be financially stable in life. This is probably the best way to go.
So there was like an intention there.
Yes.
Okay.
Very much so. And the thing is, it's like, oh yeah, like, it feels good to get praised by your family members, like, oh shit, you graduated high school.
Yeah. And
you're like, now what?
So where was that point of where, like you said, I mean, I would like to think that anytime when you finish high school and you go to college, or when you finish college, you go to university, you're kind of lost. It's
Oh,
like you have
100%.
you have a ballpark of what you want to do, where you want to be, but not exactly.
Yeah.
And by the time you figure it out, you're off to the next step.
Right.
You know. When did it come about? When it's like, okay, well now I gotta study this.
Right. The initial step to wanting to go towards nursing was because, okay, I like the feeling of getting support instead of getting looked down on,
Yeah.
because I was like the rebellious kid that always got into trouble.
Right. Yeah.
So it felt good getting that support from my family. So I'm like, okay, the most natural step for me to take is, okay, I'll do what everyone else wants.
Yeah.
I'll take on nursing. So
Right.
that's how it went. The first 2 years, obviously, it felt like I was undecided, because I would always say that, because in Santa Monica College, it's like, I guess in any college, it's like, you have to take your general eds first before you get into that program.
Right.
Santa Monica College has a pretty, from what I remember, it was a pretty good nursing program. And what I thought I was going to do was, I don't know what research I took or what fooled me into thinking, oh, just take your general ed and just take the nursing program in Santa Monica so you don't have to go to university.
Mm-hmm.
You could just take it at a 2-year school. It's close. You don't have to deal with all that stress. You can just take it at a community college. You'll get by fine.
Right.
I did. That was the plan. And then I started taking those classes, those science classes. These are basic science classes, by the way. Like, I was in those AP science classes. I was in honors physics and all that stuff in high school, but by the time I got into college, I carried over senioritis all the way through, just because I finally had a car. I had my own freedom. So with that decision of taking up nursing, the laziness also came with it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And with that laziness, I had to dig deep, and I'm like, oh my God, these classes are crazy hard. Even for, I'm not saying even for me, but these classes are hard. How come I'm not comprehending it as easily as everyone else?
Would you say that maybe one source of the laziness is because you kind of knew deep down that this is not what you wanted to do?
I didn't have that realization yet.
Okay.
There was a really, 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 really low point of that in that transition, where there's a certain chemistry class that I needed, but in order to get in there, I needed to take a math class.
Right.
I don't want to be going to Santa Monica for a math class. So I kind of slacked around the whole time I was in Santa Monica. I'm like, you know what? Glendale's good enough. They probably have a good nursing program. I'll go there. So I transferred to Glendale, and I'm like, okay, I'll knock these general ed classes out of the way. I'll get that math class so I can get into that chemistry class or whatever, you know? I did that, and I was in those math classes. I'm like, what the hell is this? And then I'm like, I hate math already. I've always hated math.
Me too.
You know?
Yeah.
I've always hated math, and I'm like, I'm trying to get into a chemistry class, and I have to get through this math class too. And then and there was a time where I was taking that math class. I took that math class twice. And community college, no matter what, people will tell you, it's so hard to get into a class.
Yeah.
It's so hard to just get on that roster.
Right, yeah.
It's the most nerve-wracking and anxiety-driven thing to be on the wait list.
Yeah.
Because what do you do the whole semester is if the only goal is to get into that chemistry class is to get that one math class that you can't get.
Right.
So there was a semester where I didn't get it.
Yeah.
And I had to fake in front of my parents that I was going to school. I would just leave the house, go to the park, and sleep for a whole semester.
Wow.
I'd be coming home at 12 in the afternoon, but I'll leave 8 in the morning. I'd be parked right there. I'll sleep for 4 hours, and then I'll go back and I'll come home and make it look like I just came from class.
Right.
For a whole semester.
Yeah.
That was not good. I don't wish this upon anybody, but I've never experienced this. I never want to experience this, but I legit felt homeless.
Wow.
Because I was driving somewhere just to sleep because I couldn't stand that class.
Right.
You know, and I did that for a whole semester, and that was basically the turning point where I had those hours in the car were spent sleeping, but also spent lying there being like, what the hell
What am I doing? Yeah.
What am I doing? It was a lot of self-reflection, you know?
Yeah.
And you start thinking back, I'm like, what are they going to think? What are they going to think of me if I can't get through this? Because I felt like I will not graduate college.
Right.
I was just super bummed, depressed. It's like, it never got to the point where I was abusive depressed. Like, I never got into, like, substance abuse or something, but I was just stagnant. I didn't do anything.
Right.
You know? And it was those things where you want to move, but you don't know it's really you don't know the avenues you take until you actually take them. And I didn't take anything because I wasn't moving.
Stuck between a rock and a hard place, essentially.
Exactly. And I didn't want to move for some reason. Just because I think you could say it's laziness or just being scared of what else I can mess up.
Yeah.
You know? For a whole semester. And then there was just this one day...
How many times a week was this going on?
Oh, it's a math class. I had to be... quote unquote, I had to pretend I was going to math class, so I had to pretend I was going to class 4 times a week.
Oh wow! So this was going on 4 times a week?
4 times a week for a whole semester.
16 weeks.
16 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, a whole semester. Because I was so devastated that I couldn't get the math class that I couldn't go back to my mom and be like, "Hey, I couldn't get the class. I'm just gonna be staying home."
So when did that point come in where finally you said, "Okay, all this is going on. It's not for me. Things are not working out." When was it that point where, because I know one time you told me that your parents have also told you that, hey, if there's ever something going on, come and talk to us about it.
Yeah. So basically it just kind of triggered, it's not triggered, but like I just remembered one day in like mid reflection or something, because I think it could have been literally the next semester already where I actually got the math class. And I actually got the math class, but I was just thinking, I'm like, I have to look maybe 4 steps ahead now. So I'm in this class, I'm in a happy place, because I'm more relieved than anything.
Right.
You know?
No more staying in the car.
No more staying in a car, in the hot-ass car.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I have to move forward, but at the same time, I have to make a plan. I have to formulate a plan. And I'm like, I had to kind of reflect back to my days in Santa Monica. I'm like, why didn't it work for me over there? Why was there no motivation? Because it can't be laziness. It couldn't be this. And I was just thinking, how did you feel in the class, in those science classes?
Right.
Because that's what they make you take. And I just pretty much be like, I kind of told myself, I'm like, oh, I felt terrible. I did not want to be in there. As much as I'm like, I want to boast that I'm in smart classes and blah, 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 I also did not want to be in there.
Yeah.
Because the extracurricular classes I noticed that I liked more were the drawing, were the painting, the surrounds, the simpler classes, but yet the classes that make you do other type of brain work, creative brain work, not mathematical stuff. And that's so I pretty much, I'm like, okay. And this was the time where I have been filming semi and professional, whatever, skateboarding for some time. That's what I did that's what I was all of high school. That's what I did. I started when I was 12, you know, and basically I never thought of it as a profession. I always thought of it as fun, but those years are what formed who I am now.
Yeah.
Basically my taste in everything.
Yeah.
But I never thought of that as an outlet. Or I never thought of that as like a way through. And then I thought of it and I'm like, hey, filming them was fun, but I hated it because we were always outside in the hot sun and we would always get in trouble and stuff like the anxiety of that. It's like I loved being on a skateboard. I loved filming it. But what I liked more was when I got home, I get to watch the footage and I get to put it together. In the end, when you watch it, you feel something.
Yeah.
That's when I'm like, you know, that's when it kind of like, not right away. It didn't go to that film route right away, but it's like, click. And then I'm like, how do I get that to my parents?
Yeah. So
what was the core? There's this conversation me and my dad were having where, because he's like a aeronautical geek. So he always made model planes for me and model shuttles, and he always bought me Legos and stuff. That's what triggered it probably, because he got my creative brain going.
Yeah.
that I didn't realize that until now.
There you go.
There you go. There's a moment of discovery.
Yes,
Right on your podcast, dude. So there you go. So thank you for that.
Yeah, man.
Cheers.
No.
But and there was this one day where somehow I got this question out where he's like, "What do you want to be?" And I'm like, "I don't know, maybe a doctor, or something like that." And then for some reason I asked him like, "Why? What do you want me to be?" And then he goes, "Well, that's up to you, because if we tell you what to do, and you're not happy, that's our fault."
Right.
That stayed with me forever. It's just that it didn't click until I was in that car sleeping, and until I had to think about me not wanting to be in that car sleeping for a whole semester again, you know?
Right.
So that's basically the root. So I kind of put two and two together where if that was like the early on effect of that, where if I'm not happy with what I'm doing, I'm not doing it. That's basically what the root of it was, where I was not happy in these science classes. I was not happy in the course that I was in. So that's basically where if you're not happy with what you're doing, then it's our fault. You shouldn't do it. You should go with what you like.
Yeah.
So I basically had to sit them down one day, and it was so hard. So the first thing I had to do was make sure I touched base with them, you know? So I'm like, I told my dad, I'm like, remember that thing you said to me when I was like really young? He's like, what? He's like, remember when you said, if we tell you what to be and you're not happy, it's our fault.
Right.
Like, okay. And I'm sure they already knew. I basically said, okay, you know how you told me, oh yeah, if you're not happy, it's our fault. I told them that. And then they're like, okay. And then I just needed to hear my dad remember. You know, he's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. Right now, with my current major, with nursing, and the classes I'm in, I'm not happy. And I feel like I will only excel in these classes. I will only take these classes passionately and soak in the information if I'm happy. And it seems like everything going down this road is telling me that I'm not.
Right.
They're like, and then the ultimate question is, they still don't look at me, because I feel like it's still kind of, they're hearing what I'm saying, but if it's still, they're still putting it off as he's going through a phase.
Yeah.
You know?
It's a stage.
It's not acknowledged yet,
Yeah.
you know? It's a stage.
Yeah.
And then they're like, what do you want to be? And then I'm like, well, I think I am going more towards an artistic major, and I think I want to go into film. That I'm planning to transfer to CSUN, which has a really good film program.
Okay.
Shout out, but like, which has a really good film program, and that added another perk to them because I got ambitious enough to want to transfer to a university.
Right, as opposed to before when it was just college. I'll just do this. Avoid. Yeah,
exactly. So it's like I gave them, I guess, like a triple threat where it's like I change my major, I transfer, but when I do transfer, I come out hopefully successful enough to where I get a good career, and I come out of it with a bachelor's.
Right.
I get to the goal I want to get to with film editing, but you're also getting this too where I get a bachelor's degree and you have something to show for it.
Right.
But all my dad said was, well, just be good at it.
So you tell your parents, your dad says, whatever you do, just do it well. And was it just, that's it? Off onto film? Or was it kind of like you need to kind of transition into it and kind of get into it? Or was it just, nope, okay, now I'm doing this?
The funny part is that's what gave me momentum and motivation, because it was that easy to tell them.
Okay.
That's the one thing I'm like, I could have done that earlier.
In all honesty, could you have?
I could have, but I needed that low point.
Something in your mind had to click before you had that conversation.
Yeah. Because honestly, I didn't do my homework. Like, I didn't research the possibilities I had.
Yeah.
Because I was just on that mindset of, I'm going to mess around.
Be stagnant for a while.
I'm going to go to nursing school. Basically, what my dad told me when I was young about being happy tied into about tied into skateboarding, where those times where I didn't want to be at home, didn't want to be at home studying, and those times I was bummed about maybe like a girl when I was younger or something. The only time I forgot, the only time I was so happy was when I stepped outside with my friends and I got on my skateboard.
Right.
And that pretty much tied into everything, where I had that freedom, where I want enough freedom or I want enough happiness to where I feel like that all the time.
Right.
And it didn't matter what my social status was. It didn't matter what my money situation was. Of course, I want a certain amount of success, but at the same time, the most important thing to me, even till now, is happiness.
Right.
In order for me to want to feel happy, I had to feel that sad when I was sleeping in that car.
Right.
Like, damn, I can't be that sad anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
I've been there once. I don't want to go back.
Exactly.
Wow. So you go from being at a point where you take this on, you're like, okay, I'll be stagnant for a while. Let's just kind of see what happens type of deal, to sleeping in a car for a semester and assessing, processing where you kind of are, where you want to go, to having this conversation with your parents of, hey, I'm not happy, and here's the deal. And your dad saying, whatever you do, just be good in it. And fair to say that the rest is history.
Yeah.
With that said, what I usually like to do before I close it out is, after everything that you've just talked about right now, what would be your one piece of advice for someone who maybe is in a position that you used to be in, where maybe they just finished the college or a university and they don't know where to go, who to turn to? Maybe I'll do this, but so-and-so says do that. Where do I go? Who do I talk to? What would be your number one piece of advice for anybody out there?
The best thing to do is, if you feel like you're between two things, but you know that one thing is better for you in terms of just overall happiness, I guess, is you're not going to know until you take that risk, you make that decision. And it's better to go in a certain direction, so that even if you go in the wrong direction, that means you find out that you don't want to go in that direction,
right.
So you go in the other direction. But it's better to go a direction than not going any direction at all.
And just standing still.
So just, don't stand still. Just take the risk.
There you go, guys. You just heard it here. Another episode concluded on the Anything But Everything podcast. Thank you once again for joining us, and we will see you all next time.